So yeah, today I'm here to talk to you about choices and the thing about choices. You know, when I was thinking about what to talk about today, one of the themes that was suggested was uncommon sense. And I was thinking about that, and the first thing that came to mind was my mom. You know, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to secondary school. So I know some of you here went to MGS, your MC today, for example. So I went to MGS as well. That's me there. Yep, a bit nerdy looking, but it's true. Okay, and back when I was in MGS, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I wasn't very focused in school, I didn't really study, and so after my O-levels, I had so many points that my mom said, do it again. And you know, my mom is American, so maybe she doesn't understand. You know, we save face here, we don't just do things again like that, right? You follow the path. If you cannot go to JC, you can choose. Maybe you go to Poly, maybe you go to ITE. You know, you see where life kind of points you depending on how you do. And my mom said, no, life is not about going where the path is laid out for you next, but it's really about having a choice. So she said, no. You do it again, and then you can choose. She said, I don't care where you go. It doesn't matter to me where you go, but I want you to have a choice. So I was like, this is very weird, you know. And I said to her, Mommy, like, this is very weird. People don't do that. And then I said, so where am I supposed to go to do O-levels again? I don't even know how to do this process, right? And MGS doesn't retain, so I couldn't do it again at MGS. So I said, then since this is your idea, then you tell me where you want me to go to do my O-levels again. So she said, okay, I know. You do it as a private candidate, right? And then you go to school at RGS. So I said, you know, like, does this sound weird to you? Because like to me it sounds really weird, you know. But again, you know, maybe different culture, I don't know, right? So I'm like, let me see if I phrase this differently, maybe she'll understand that, you know, this is not done. So she said, no, I think this is a brilliant plan. Let's go and ask. At the time, it was Kami Lim, the principal. She said, let's just ask. You know, anyway, if you're a private candidate, even if you get as many points, I don't know, like 30-something, I had points again, right? It won't affect the school aggregate. So, you know, really, I think it should be fine. I'm like, yeah, this is a great idea, you know, but so we scheduled the appointment, and keep in mind now, we don't know Kami Lim at the time. It's not that I was going to go play netball for RGS or donate a library. My mother just thought this was an idea worth exploring at the time. So given that I had 30 plus points, I also couldn't say much, right? I already was like, okay. So we went, and we get there, we sit down, and then of course my mother says to Camila, oh yeah, you know, my daughter here has a great idea she wants to share with you. You know parents, right? I'm like, thanks, thanks. So I was like, oh yeah, so I got 30-something points, and I'm going to do my O-levels again because my mother says that she wants me to choose my next step and not be forced into it. Can I go to your school for a year, right? So Kami Lim says, oh, did you get kicked out of MGS? You know, is this a discipline issue? So I explained that actually, no, I wasn't a bad child. I just didn't study, you know, and so I went to RGS for a year. I really did. So the first thing I learned about choices from my mother is sometimes they are like super weird, okay? This was really, really weird, right? It's weird, right? I still think it's weird. So after that, you know, luckily, I did much better the next time round. And then I ended up going on to JC, and I went to college. And during this time, you know, of not knowing what I wanted to be, netball was something that I understood, right? And I excelled at. So I graduated, and I wanted to be a helicopter paramedic. You know, I had always this desire to give back, but I loved adventure, and I thought, you know what, I don't just want to be a paramedic in a van, you know, I must be a helicopter paramedic and jump out, you know. So I was thinking this is a great plan, right? But at the same time, for netball, it was World Champs, Commonwealth Games, and so Singapore, the national team said, you know, can you come back? And I was like, how? Singapore, I cannot be a helicopter paramedic unless I join SAF, right? And so I realized that plan perhaps would be shattered, so I came back. And then I ended up working at Standard Chartered Bank, and then after that, at Channel News Asia, okay? And so it was during my time at Channel News Asia that I stopped playing netball. And you know, sometimes when you stop playing a sport or you stop rehearsing for some big choir concert or whatever it is you guys do, you have this void that you want to fill, right? So I had this big void, you know, after how many years of training 6 days a week, right? Every night I go home and I'm like, oh, it's me, my mom. I'm like, hey, mom, this is weird. I'm usually out training with my friends. And so when a friend of mine said, hey, we're going to form this all-ladies team to take part in this 450 kilometer mountain bike race in Timor-Leste. You want to be our 4th member, right? So I went, I Googled Timor. I was like, wow, assassination attempt on the president, civil unrest. So I was like, yeah. I think this can fill the void. So I was like, yes, please, I'll sign me up for that. So then we formed this team and we really ended up going there and taking part. Oh, wait, don't look. Okay, now, while I was there, remember all this time I had this desire, and I still did, to give back. But I really didn't know how. If I wasn't a helicopter paramedic, then what did giving back look like, right? I mean, I care about old people, I really do. I also care about animals, and I care about children, I care about education. So for a long time, I was like, I don't know where to start. So don't start, right? For a long time, I was like, I don't know, these dogs are so cute, maybe I should work at a shelter, and then I was like, oh, these elderly people also, I should go and keep them company so they're not lonely, or, malnutrition, human trafficking, all this poverty. So I did nothing, right? Because I couldn't decide. Come on, don't pretend now, you all know what I'm talking about. It's very overwhelming, so I was paralyzed. But then when I was here in Timor, the more that I learned about the country, it was at the time the youngest nation in Asia, in the world actually. It was the poorest country in Asia, and malnutrition was a really big problem there. Now, I had no idea about malnutrition, right? But I understood sport and adventure, and I thought maybe we could use the adventure to raise funds and awareness for a cause on the ground that resonated with the team. So which cause? Don't know, right? But along the way, we met this lady named Rosaria Martins de Cruz. And she was the Timorese director of Hiam Health, a center that focused on malnutrition in a country where this is a huge issue. And we ended up raising funds for Hiam Health. As you do with many of these first efforts, you raise these funds, you hand it over. But I remember when I handed it over, she said to me, and she had tears rolling down her cheeks, she said, I want my country to be like your country. I want my people to be like your people, healthy in their bodies, smiling in their faces. And in that moment, what struck me was that there is no perfect cause. There's no perfect choice, but here was the opportunity to stand behind somebody who was there in the trenches. It was a way for me to learn more about what giving back could look like, but to say, I haven't figured this all out, but I'm going to make a choice, right? And at that point, we decided that we would then focus on growing the Chain Reaction Project. We would go back to Timor-Leste. We would continue to work with Hiam Health, and that's what we did. And so this very imperfect choice of malnutrition as a first cause at Timor-Leste, because I like to ride my bicycle, was what for me started on that journey of the Chain Reaction Project, right? So that was the next lesson that I learned about choices. The first is sometimes they're super weird, and then oftentimes they're really not perfect. You wait for the perfect choice, so you make no choice. But sometimes that's not how choices present themselves. And so there we were, back in Timor for the next few years. And it was a few years down the road that I found myself in the Philippines. And this is where I met this lady, Cecilia Flores Oibanda. And so Cecilia is, again, this fiery, passionate woman that heads up the Visayan Forum Foundation, one of the leaders in the fight against human trafficking in the Philippines. Now, during the Marcos regime, she was a freedom fighter, and she was imprisoned for that, her role in that, during that time. And she actually ended up giving birth to her 2 kids in prison. And she named one Kip and one Mayala, which means to capture or imprison and freedom. And she said that she used to climb this tree in the middle of the prison courtyard so that her kids could see life outside the prison walls, because they had never seen life outside the prison. And she felt that to her, that was the most degrading way, or thing that could happen to a woman, to raise your children in prison like that. Until she met a survivor of human trafficking. And she said that in that moment that she realized that that was what she was going to dedicate her life to. And so as I was talking to her, she said, so often people look at her and they say, wow, she's this hero, she must possess these amazing abilities to be able to be so brave, to be so bold, to give everything up and go fight like that, they make her out to be a martyr and they put her on a pedestal. And she said so often people forget that she's just a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. And it struck me in that moment that while I was still with Channel News Asia, was I also leaving it to the people like Cecilia to go out there and make that difference? And for me, it was a scary choice at that time, but meeting Cecilia was what I think galvanized me into my choice to leave Channel News Asia and actually focus on the Chain Reaction Project, actually registering it as a nonprofit, actually growing it to see, can we work with schools, can we work with corporates, can we increase the impact of what we do in attempting to make that difference, right? And it was really realizing then that the thing about choices is that sometimes they're scary, right? Cecilia, the choices she made were scary, and for me it was scary to give up something like Channel News Asia, and I was doing well. My mother always could see me on TV, so proud. My daughter that failed O-levels now made it, see her big shot, you know? But you know, it was one of those things that, you know what? You know, making that decision for me was realizing that, you know what, sometimes it's the weird, the imperfect, and the scary choices, right? That maybe are the right ones for you. And so, right now, yes, I'm in Mercy Relief, and this next phase of my journey was really when I found myself in Nepal. And at the time, they had asked, would I consider the role of executive director of Mercy Relief? And it was a role that was so much bigger than I was, that you know, I was not sure. Do I take this or do I not take this? But I remember that when I was there, I met this lady. I was walking through Bhaktapur, in Nepal, which is where you have a lot of the temples, and it's a beautiful cultural, historic area. And a lot of that was in ruins and devastated. And there were houses there as well. And I saw this lady just going in and out of her house, so methodically clearing the debris from her house. And we made eye contact. And in that moment, you know, that sadness and heaviness that she felt, it struck me so deep. And through my interpreter, I spoke to her sister actually, and found out that Asta here, they were 2 of 3 sisters, and that the earthquake, they had lost their younger sister and nephew and niece during the earthquake. And so what they were doing was really just trying to take their mind off things by clearing that rubble. And I remember I said, oh, you know, have you guys received any aid, you know, in the aftermath of the earthquake? And they said, oh yeah, we have, but we turned it down so it could go to others who need it more, you know. And in that moment, that choice that they made it was unexpected. That's not what I expected to hear, you know. And I think that when I think about choices now, and I look back on my life, and I look back on the different people that I've met, I've realized that the thing about choices is that eventually they all come to define you. The weird choices, the imperfect choices, the scary choices, the unexpected choices. You know, and one thing that I've realized is that for me, in meeting all of these people along the way that make those choices every day, is to challenge yourself not to be limited by the expected, the normal, or the safe, but to try to live a little bit in the realms of what could be if you made decisions that weren't normal, that weren't safe, expected, or perfect.